Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning, which is on looking at learning trends post-COVID-19. This is about how to create the environment and the culture for learning in your organization as we continue to deal with the fallout from the pandemic, and as learning and development and HR practitioners have to cope with new waves of next normal. Over the last few months, Zac and I have been talking to a number of our clients and observing what's going on, understanding how learning might need to adapt and change as we all continue to return to work and renew ourselves in the organization. And we thought it would be helpful to share with you some of the key things that we've identified out there in the marketplace as your teams begin to turn to work, as they start to think about the learning and development that they need going forward. So just quickly to introduce ourselves, on the next slide, you'll see we are the Innovation Beehive, and we exist to release the energy and potential of people at work. And by doing that, we accelerate the potential of individuals, teams, leaders, and organizations. I'm Mok O'Keeffe. I'm the founder of the Innovation Beehive. I founded the business nearly 12 years ago. And before that, I spent many years working in HR and as an L&D practitioner, both in the UK, United States, and in Australia. We're privileged to work with a number of different organizations, some of whom you'll see there, as broad as think tanks like the World Economic Forum, the world's largest restaurant chain, McDonald's, Menzies Aviation, Baringa, Diageo, all different sectors. And we've been talking to these clients and understanding what their challenges are, and also looking out broader in the marketplace to try and bring you some insight today about the things that you need to focus on as you start to develop your learning strategies in a post-COVID-19 world. So I'm now going to hand over to Zac, who'll take you through with me chipping in occasionally.
Mok, chip in whenever you like. Mok, I do like your background there. It's very professional. I love it. I need to maybe declutter behind me here.
Maybe that could be a theme, decluttering.
It could be that. That could be the webinar in a few months' time. Perfect. Look, thanks again, re-echoing Mok's words, everyone, for attending. I'm just looking through the list of people we've got on the webinar now. We've actually got a huge range of amazing organizations and people attending, from major global quick service restaurants, high street banks I can see on the list, manufacturers, consultants, and even a well-known innovator on the call here. But what do we all have in common? Well, we do have a number of things in common, but one is, of course, we want ourselves, our teams, our organizations to benefit from very powerful and effective learning, which supports organizations to achieve their goals and their strategic direction and strategy generally. Now, as Mok said, we have been researching a number of different areas to help us understand how we can reinforce, as a company, learners becoming stronger than ever before going forwards. And that's led us to uncover a number of different golden threads which have emerged through the insight work that we've done, a number of key trends which have come out. I mean, firstly, can you imagine, just take a moment to sit back and imagine all of the employees in your company, or if you're a consultant, the people that work for the companies that you support, post-COVID, at all levels of the business, growing like you saw that barley in the first slide, moving with the wind, moving in harmony, and growing despite teams being more distributed, growing despite our teams facing a number of new challenges in the way we interact with each other, not just because they should, not just because it's the right thing to do for the business, but because they want to, because they're motivated to, because they have a desire now for community-based learning, for example. Because you've created a culture of learning post-COVID which empowers them and engages them to do so, more than we've ever done before. In this webinar, as Mok mentioned, we will explore 5 key golden threads, 5 key learning trends that we need to work on in our organizations in the next 18 months if we're going to strengthen the learning output and ideally then the business results going forwards. You've heard Mok's background there. My name is Zac Curtis. I've got around 15 years in the learning space, being a learning and development director with a large global organization and supporting other organizations besides that. And it's, as Mok mentioned, it's beyond what we have with our personal experience. We've gathered insights from other organizations. We have researched the market and the key thought leaders in the COVID and learning space to draw these threads out. But it's not just about what we think. We want your views on what the landscape might look like as well. So it's going to be a highly interactive webinar, as usual. It's going to involve, please, lots of exercising of the fingers by typing into the chat box at various moments, as well as polls as well. So locate the chat box where you can. Mok has written a message saying, hello, everybody. But right now, there's going to be a couple of polls, which we'll bring up now. There's going to be 2 questions in those polls. The first question is going to be, just before we bring it up, just to get you thinking about it, how important do you think learning is perceived to be in your organization in the next 18 months? The second question is, what do you perceive to be the most important benefits that learning can bring in 2020, 2021? So if I just bring those up now, you'll have there 2 questions in one. You'll see for the first question, you have 5 different options: paramount importance, very important, quite important, not important, and learning. And then for the second question, which you may need to scroll down to, it's the benefit could be a sense of feeling cared for, to keep staff upskilled in processes, and that's including COVID processes, to improve skill set, to improve attitude and mindset, and to bring staff together. So hopefully you can all see those 2 questions there, and do feel free to click on the ones which you feel are relevant. And I believe these 2 are single answer questions.
And this is a really important place to start because, you know, as we've all had to adapt and change our ways of working as a learning and development community, we've really had to step up to the mark here, whether it's about helping people understand new practices, new operations, whether it's about helping leaders to communicate in different new ways. You know, when we all started to work from home in March, we all suddenly had to realize we had all this inbuilt technology in the organization, but many of our clients told us they didn't actually have the capability to use things like Teams and Zooms and all the sorts of different remote working tools. And as practitioners, we've really stepped up to meet the immediate demand and to solve the immediate problems as we went through the various stages initially of the pandemic. But now it's about saying, as an organization, what do we need now? Not just to operate in where we are now, but also to support the organization to renew itself and to grow and spot new opportunities as we start to build back the economy.
Yeah, thank you, Mok. So we've had a number of results in. I'm going to share them now, and we'll just have a quick chat about each one. So you should see on your screens the results now. For question 1, how important is learning perceived to be in your organization in the next 18 months? Very, very positive, which is encouraging. So the majority of people, 45%, not majority, but the majority of answers, 45%, perceive that their organizations feel that learning is of paramount importance, which is good, or very important or quite important. I know in the past, there's been a number of challenges with organizations not placing enough emphasis on learning. So I don't know if people feel that COVID has perhaps helped organizations to feel that learning is more important now. Do feel free to type in the chat if you have an opinion on that. Mok, anything surprising in that question 1 for you?
So I think it's interesting, there's, you know, that whole piece, that the largest piece obviously about improving skill set, and secondly, to keep staff upskilled in processes, including COVID processes. There's a piece around actually, you know, learning and development on topics that are the usual topics, potentially around things like leadership, etc. But that whole piece around upskilling, we as practitioners will have to, you know, almost anticipate what the challenge might be in the future. Yeah. For our stakeholders, then develop the learning intervention, and then work out a way to deliver that in the most appropriate manner, whether it's remotely or whether it's face-to-face or a blend of the 2. Yeah. Great to see that learning is so high on the agenda. I hope for our colleagues on the webinar here that budgets are matching the importance that people are placing on learning.
Let's not go there just yet, but I'm sure we will shortly. The second question, what do you perceive to be the most important benefits that learning can bring? No one really felt that the priority was a sense of feeling cared for, but the most was an improved skill set. So that's a sort of very traditional output from learning and development, which is good. Attitude and mindset features reasonably highly, as does to keep staff upskilled in processes, including COVID processes, and to bring staff together. What's interesting for me about that, Mok, is we have seen a marked increase generally in people, in employees wanting to feel cared for and to have trust in the organization, perhaps, which isn't necessarily reflected in these results.
No, but I guess in terms of, any learning interventions, whether it's about helping people to feel safe and secure as they return to their place of work, if they choose to return to their place of work, giving them the skills to be able to work from home effectively, helping leaders with the skills they need to be more empathetic and understand some of the challenges that their people are going through as they balance the needs of the business and the needs of their personal life during this pandemic, is all about ultimately the organisation sending a signal that A, we care about you, and B, we're investing in you. And hopefully that will lead then to increased retention rates, more productivity as people feel more engaged and invested in by the organisation.
Yeah, true. Absolutely true. Good. Thank you, Mok. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts there. Very good. I'm just going to close that down. We should probably think about what the ultimate goal might be for us when we're thinking about learning next year. Well, what we do know is that HR and learning and development generally needs to become even more strategic in the way that it operates, more so than we have been previously. In a study by Personio this month of 500 HR managers in the UK, only 46% had a specific HR and L&D recovery plan in place over the next 12 months. 42% of those 500 said that training and development activities had suffered since the beginning of the pandemic. So, we need a really clear strategic plan to do a number of things. It needs to be able to bring the senior leadership and the teams and employees together in terms of expectations and the way that we might move forwards in learning. But we also need something which brings employees together in a community, something which might reignite development in a way which takes into account newly distributed teams or new ways of working. And that's because we need to make sure that our teams feel that they're being invested in, but also that we actually do invest in our teams. We need to make sure that we can keep them engaged in the organization, that we can keep them upskilled, but also reskilled. And we need something which engages learners in a way which is easy, which is accessible, something which means that they will proactively and willingly, without being necessarily being pushed into learning, will try to grow themselves off their own backs. We also need to try and think about a strategy that will help us to grow a highly skilled workforce that enables delivery of the organizational goals and strategies. So I think that's the direction we're generally heading in, with some similarities to what we were trying to do before COVID. It's just that perhaps the mechanism and tools that we need to use are different because of the different ways of working. Now, that does mean there's going to be some challenges, of course, a number of challenges. And it's about time that we had your views on challenges as well. So I guess Mok's exercising his fingers there already. It's going to be a number of different options, which I'll read through. And you can select multiple options. But if there's something there which you feel is a challenge to stop us delivering a clear and unified learning strategy in the next 18 months, do type it into the chat as well. But let me just launch this poll now and talk you through the options. So the question is,
what do you perceive to be the difficulties in delivering your learning strategy post-COVID-19?
Oh, thanks, Mok. That's a nice duo there. The options are: the team is now more distributed across multiple locations, more so than ever before. Difficulty might be making learning engaging now that there's not so much face-to-face. It might be the difficulty is a barrier to investment in learning technology or other tech which can bring people together virtually. It might be the barrier is learners taking accountability for their learning when they're not necessarily all in the same place. The barrier might be keeping content that's relevant to learners, or it might be keeping people feeling safe while learning. or it could be some other form of emotional fallout from COVID-19, potentially budget constraints, or senior leaders focused on COVID operations and their priority not necessarily being learning. So do feel free to put your tick where your thoughts are, and it could be multiple options there. And if there's a barrier or a challenge which you feel is not listed, do type it into the chat and we can discuss as we go along. I mean, Mok, I would assume that, budget would be there all the time. If we had unlimited budget, we could do unlimited things. We're never going to have unlimited budget, so budget is potentially always a constraint.
I think actually, as learning practitioners, we're in a unique space in terms of having proved our mettle over the last few months in terms of helping the organisations to learn through the challenges, and hopefully with some of the trends that we'll identify and go through shortly, to be able to really make the argument to release budget from leaders around if we want to deliver an effective organisation going forward. So you're right, budget's a constraint for every part of an organisation. But thinking about anticipating what the challenges might be allows you then to form your arguments to try and release that funding that you need.
Yeah. And of course, the argument is that learning is more important now than it was pre-pandemic. Because we need to make sure that people feel engaged, need to make sure that people feel part of the company, engaged by the community, and part of a community of the company, but also that they continue to be able to do the job effectively.
Yeah, I was reading this morning that over 45% of people in the UK workforce are saying that they're feeling burnt out and exhausted, whether they're on furlough or whether they're working as well. Yeah. And actually, by taking time to invest in those individuals should they're learning, you're almost refilling their fuel tanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll just wait 10 more seconds and I will close off that poll.
Interesting. We've got some very interesting results here, actually. I think people are taking full advantage of the multiple choice option. It's great.
We love giving freedom. Okay, so ending that now. And again, do feel free to type into the chat if there's anything additional that you feel you'd like to say. And you should see on your screens now the results, and you should be able to scroll down through them. There are two out front at the moment, both with 45% of the vote. And those are making learning engaging now that it's difficult to be face-to-face, and budget constraints, which is, I'm afraid, a given in any economy. The one which is interesting for me, and we'll come on to the others in a minute, is the making learning engaging now that it's difficult to be face-to-face. And I have to, it's a terrible thing to admit, but I have to admit, because one of our values is we tell the truth, that I am very comfortable, most comfortable, delivering training in a group face-to-face. The days of 15 years ago when there would be a room of people in a hotel.
You're talking about the late 90s, not 15 years ago.
I tried to push it on longer than it was practical to do so. And I still tried to do 70, 20, 10. But it was, I don't know, I just felt it was effective. But I grew and I grew and I grew. And actually the pandemic forced me to grow even further and more deeply to challenge the ways that I support people and train them and develop them and coach them virtually. And
yeah, think about that, the impact of that. We used to have our quarterly sessions at Google where we invite clients in. I mean, somewhere between 50 and 60 clients come every 12 weeks to the Google offices and hear our latest thinking on learning or agile or disruption or whatever it might be. And since March, we've had over 1,100 people join us in our free online trainings.
Yeah.
Huge exponential numbers compared to how many we used to get in a physical room, even with the invitation to come and spend the day at Google. So the opportunity to reach more people at a place and a time that suits them through either real-time delivery or recording and watching it afterwards is massive. And I think that's why we've both been so driven to develop and deliver in this new world.
I think you're right, and that makes sense. Just looking at this list, the ones which are, let's look at the outliers, the ones which, I mean, there's nothing with nothing, but the ones which are lagging behind. The team is actually got my tongue caught on my teeth. The team is now more distributed across multiple locations, learners taking accountability for their learning, and emotional fallout from COVID-19. That's quite interesting. I mean, the first one is linked to tech, but there are others which are higher up in tech, and I'm just trying to understand the difference between them. So one is a barrier to investment in tech, and the other doesn't explicitly mention tech. It's about how to actually leverage learning across multiple locations, I guess. So it sort of makes sense to me as I talk myself through it there. Mok,
I think a bit more context when we go on to the trends, actually, as well, so people can see the context of what's happening out there in the wider space.
So that's lovely. Thank you, everybody, for that. And we'll move on to those trends now. And as we work through the trends, I'd love you all to think about your own environments, your own workplace, or customers, depending on the company you're in, and to think about what you're doing really well, what you could improve. These trends, some of you may be doing already, but again, post-COVID and for the next 18 months, how can you strengthen them in a way which supports a distributed team? How can you strengthen them in a way which makes people feel that they're being invested in, but also safe, and everything which comes with the next normal of working through COVID? Those trends are, firstly, led by technology. Secondly, something that's quick and easy to digest. Thirdly, open education. Fourthly, rewarding effort. And lastly, community learning. And we will break those down one by one now. And in the breakdowns, we'll need 5 different conversations with you using the chat. So please do identify the chat function now, just to give you a heads up, because we will desperately need your interaction around some of the challenges we might face in each of these different areas. So let's start with the first one, which is led by technology. So, you know, what's happened since the start of the pandemic? Well, firstly, as Mok mentioned earlier, we've all learned, or most of us have learned, to work remotely, and we've leveraged tech to help us do this. And it's not been easy for lots of us. I don't think Mok will mind me sharing, I've struggled to sit in my house and work from home, and to try and interact in the same way, because I love being in front of people physically, and I love being on the move, and that just hasn't been able to happen. But I've managed to, even I have managed to leverage tech to help me work more effectively. You know, we've all been surprised at how our working world hasn't collapsed in the way that some of us thought it might do. And of course, learning needs to change with that. We need a way to somehow democratize learning across our newly distributed teams that makes it easy to do, where learners are connected to each other. And in the context of DE&I, we need to consider how we engage all users, and don't unknowingly exclude any population by making assumptions around their tech competence, around even their introvert or extrovert personality types, or their abilities to engage, or even, you know, disabilities such as colorblindness or sight. You know, how can we engage people using tech across all areas? And it's a real challenge for us generally, but I think we can continue to leverage tech to make sure that learners are learning all the time in a 360-degree way. That might look slightly different depending on your company. It might be that well, in fact, I can think of a company right now who don't have a learning management platform. They barely have an intranet. So their training is currently all done face-to-face. Nothing's happened for the last few months. What exactly are they going to do? What sort of learning ecosystem are they going to implement to move forwards? Whereas I know another company that's quite advanced with tech, but they still need to drive forwards in a different way to bring people together autonomously and together using that tech. So let's just think about what you feel the danger of not leveraging technology in the next 18 months might be. So if you could type into the chat, and Mok's just typed in another line there saying,
hello, welcome to the chat. I said there, hope you can all find it.
Because there could be a number of dangers, but what for you do you feel might be the danger if you don't leverage technology effectively enough in the next 18 months? That would be great if you could do that. Mok, a couple of things come to mind for me. Again, it's linked to me personally, and that is I might feel disconnected from my colleagues if I don't leverage tech in the right way for learning. So learning from, for example, other people in the innovation beehive is important to me. It's not just about what my views, it's about learning from others. So if we don't find a way, or we have found a way, but if we didn't find a way to leverage tech in that perspective, I would probably be disconnected. I would be disengaged in the organization and therefore less productive. We've got
that leads into what Jade has said here. So
yeah.
we would lose our organizational cohesion and our shared sense of purpose. And Jade, there's something in there definitely about culture and how you work together unique to your organization. I was talking to a client yesterday about the amount of free stuff that's available on YouTube or other, other learning platforms are available. And she was saying that actually they're really disencouraging people from using those free services because some of the lessons won't actually teach what they want to teach. It won't be appropriate for their culture, or they won't do it in a way that links in with their purpose and how they want to behave in their organization. And that whole sense of actually a shared purpose, as people return to work and then start to look forward to the future, we call it in our stages of the pandemic, the roadmap through uncertainty in the renew phase, people want to really feel connected into a sense of purpose, and learning and development can help us do that.
Yeah.
We've got a comment here as well. Thank you very much from Louisa, who's saying about we won't be able to connect as easily. Absolutely, and there is some things that you're going to cover on later on about communication and communities and connections. That's important here. Paul talks about the ease of use. Zoom is very easy. Teams not so intuitive, but will eventually take over in the same way that Word and Excel do. But in the meantime, there are too many diverse methods being used. Absolutely, you kind of have to agree on something that works for your organization. I know there were lots of challenges right at the very beginning when Zoom was being used a lot and there were Zoom raiders. We've got over the challenge of that, but certain organizations or some certain clients actually have banned different methodologies. I'm working with the government of Dubai at the moment. We're not allowed to use Zoom, so we're having to use Teams, which gives some challenge around breakouts. Drew's talking about, Drew's talking here about potential impacts, the barriers we may build between people in the office environment and those working remotely. Absolutely, ensuring everyone feels included wherever they might be. And particularly in an organization as Zac said, that is distributed, multi-site organization, you want to make sure that we're all in this together. And then Liz is talking about the company will get left behind and employees may start to look outside the organization. Absolutely. If people don't feel that they're being developed and they're learning and they're growing and they're stretching, particularly if that's part of your employee value proposition, ultimately, and as we start to stabilize the economy, we might see people deciding to leave the organization, and actually unwanted turnover will go up.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Absolutely makes sense. But that means then that we should focus on a number of different areas. So again, I urge you to consider what it might be that you could influence in your own organization or the companies that you work with to help them move forwards with tech. One is, of course, access outside of the workplace. A lot of you now will have people working in different locations geographically, and also for some of you at different times, depending on the shift patterns you may have adopted. So something which is accessible everywhere to anyone, in some cases at any time, but also accessible in terms of DE&I as well. The other thing we need to consider is that it needs to be available to everyone in the organization. So one of the benefits of having multiple levels coming together at once, of course, is a kind of mentorship, but reverse mentorship as well, but shared learning experiences, which I think is very powerful when you can leverage tech in that way. And a tech platform, perhaps, which encourages interaction, something which people can respond to rather than just being fed downstream from learning and development or HR, something which can also include shared practice, shared learning, perhaps even recognition, which we'll come on to in a minute.
And can I just make a point in there? Because again, talking to a client just this morning, as we're starting to develop our new, online platform, I was asking her a couple of questions about whether or not levels of interaction would be helpful. And she was saying to me, actually, by observing the conversations that are going on, I'm able to sort of take the music of the organization beyond a pulse survey or employee engagement survey. But also I'm able to, by looking at the comments and looking at the interaction, understand the quality of the content they've just seen. Do they actually understand it? And potentially identify gaps that then need to be filled in by another learning intervention. So that whole piece around encouraging interaction and then using that interaction, observing it, to use it strategically to then create more learning intervention, she said was something that she's doing very proactively.
Absolutely. The last piece to consider is increasing the range of media that we use to support people, develop them, train them. Beyond just perhaps video and webinars and the odd face-to-face or coaching, how can we somehow capture everyone's attention using tech? Good. So the second trend, the second golden thread that we've got here is quick and easy, much like most of my life. So not only are the days of extended face-to-face training unlikely to return.
Sorry, Zac.
Post-1990s, not only are the days of face-to-face training unlikely to, in the way that we were used to, at least, typical blended learning, some of the 70-20-10 stuff when, maybe there'd be some hip-to-hip work with other colleagues to learn on the job, for example, that's not going to be done in quite the same way as well. Or at least it'll be challenging to deliver effectively. And when we combine that with the increasing need and desire for information with each generation that comes into the workplace, easy access to information, quick access to information, it means that we as HR and learning and development professionals need to pounce on learning which is powerful but efficient, something which is quick, something which is easy, something which we can digest but which is still quite punchy. Mok has a great phrase, which is...
I will. I talk about learning, as we've got perhaps less stronger attention spans than we used to, perhaps as we might be multitasking. Are we potentially multitasking as we're attending online learnings? But it's about, not 4 or 5 hours interventions. It's about creating bite-sized moments of brilliance. Saying, can I say this in 30 minutes? Can I say this in 15 minutes? Can I say it in 3 minutes? Yes, traditionally we might have sat together in a classroom, but how can I get this over in a quick and easy way in a bite-sized moment of brilliance? And for me, that's the mantra as we're developing our new learning management system and consolidating our products going forward, listening to our clients and saying, how can we deliver this in the most bite-sized way, but still be absolutely brilliant in its content?
One of the things, Mok, which is linked to all this, of course, is there was a time when we were able to try to persuade people to learn, for example, on their commute to work. But lots of people now don't have a commute. So making it a bite-size moment of brilliance means that, it needs to be something they can do not on the commute, something when they have 5 minutes spare or 10 minutes spare to leap on it. It'd be great to understand what everyone's views are on the danger if we don't make learning quick and easy. If we somehow, I've spent my L&D career trying to lengthen learnings because I feel that the more time I spend with them, the easier it is for me to try and change behavior. But I am believing that we can change behavior if we try to keep things powerful.
But again, if you want to exercise your fingers, and in the chat there, what do you believe to be the challenges or the dangers if we as learning practitioners fail to make learning quick and easy? And it is a challenge for us, as you said, Zac, rightly. We're used to sort of planning our sessions with a tea break and then a coffee break and a lunch break and maybe a bit of pre-read, a bit of post-read. But we as practitioners will have to get the confidence and the competence to be able to really deliver those bite-sized moments of brilliance that still have impact for our stakeholders.
Well, one thing that will emerge, Mok, is that all of these trends that we've identified will they work together to form a kind of learning ecosystem, which means that the key part about making things quick and easy is getting people to want to do it. Just because you put something quick and easy in front of somebody doesn't mean that they'll do it or learn from it. They need to have the desire and the motivation to do it, which comes from some of the other trends as well. So it all meshes in together.
Well, we've got a comment coming here from Christine. Thank you. The danger is about disengagement. Absolutely. How long, we do have talk of Zoom fatigue, but how long can you spend in front of a computer actually in a learning environment? So, as I mentioned, we're doing a project with the government of Dubai at the moment. It's around becoming world-class civil service, looking at innovations in government all around the world. Initially, what we're doing is we're actually running a study tour. We're going to go and visit innovation practitioners and members of governments around the world. We're now having to build that into an online program. And actually, it's going to be delivered over 3 weeks with a couple of hours every couple of days over 3 weeks, because we just felt people could not be asked to sit in front of a computer for 5 or 6 hours. And even if you put that in their timetable, they will wander off. They will start looking at a separate screen. Their videos will turn off. Their mute will go on. They'll start doing something else. So really thinking about those quick, an hour here, an hour 4 days later, rather than even 3 or 4 hour training programs, I would say.
Absolutely. We've had a good comment through here. The learner's experience may be a chore rather than engaging. Absolutely true. And that does mean if it's engaging enough, we can increase the frequency of those small bite-sized moments of brilliance, so that people can get more engaged with learning generally if the timing, the frequency is right. Got another comment here. More than ever, the requirement is for just enough, just in time training and development activity. And engagement and interactivity are key. Yeah,
I think it's actually happened for lots of people over the last few months, Paul, around, as we are faced with new challenges, the learning team has said, right, okay, this has come up, this is a problem, this is a challenge, we need something to go out to the field now. So actually we've learned to move at pace, and more we've learned to use the online world. And I'm just very minded that, pre-COVID-19, and certainly in the early days of online learning, it was more for compliance, it was more for health and safety. But the idea that, for example, that we've been running a leadership development program with the team in Australia online would have been an anathema. Even a year ago, we were all set to spend some time in Australia this year delivering that program. Now, as I said, it's being done over a number of days with bite-sized moments in the morning.
Yeah. Absolutely. Good, perfect. So let's just have a quick focus on some of the things that we need to think about around this trend of quick and easy. So consider your own positions there and think about, how can we make our sessions really powerful? How can we perhaps condense learning down into something which is digestible, but also strong and punchy? How can we make more of our content somehow on demand, that's beneficial for time or even beneficial for DE&I reasons. And nuggets. Now, a nugget is essentially a distilled power session. How can you get through the key messages, perhaps after a power session, to reinforce the key messages? And you can continue to do that to embed learning going on. And industry stimulation. Now, this is something which I attribute to the success of most of my career. So in any job role, the more I can think broadly about the industry, then the stronger my role is going to be. For example, if I was a salesperson in a real estate business, I would want to know about the real estate business generally, not just about how to sell. So the more that we can perhaps stimulate people or develop people, even using tech, on the broader parts of their job, the better they're going to be. And if it's quick and easy, the more engaged they're likely to be.
And I was thinking about this point when we were talking through it yesterday, Zac. I was thinking overnight, actually, as we are potentially distributed, being isolated at home and not working with our colleagues, the worry is we'll get a real tunnel vision and just focus on what I need to do, my tasks, my role, my function. By stimulating people across the industry, what you're helping people is to make connections, to spot opportunities, and to think broader than just what they're focusing on at the moment in terms of their individual objectives. I think that leads to not only individual growth, potentially also spotting a value-added opportunities for the organisation and increased personal network as well.
And just as Liz was talking about earlier, potentially increased retention.
Yeah.
Okay, and the last piece there is community interaction. So how can you make community interaction in learning context somehow easy and quick to do, just like we see in all of the social networks that we have all around us at the moment. The next trend is open education. So let's just remind ourselves of the goal. The goal is to essentially create this strong community of learning where learners are motivated, they're drawn to learning in the organization, they're driven to improve themselves, not just because they're pushed to by the organization, but because they desire it in themselves. They want to develop not just their roles, perhaps beyond their roles through the industry or beyond that. it's going to be important that we provide them with a facility to grow in this way. And the most powerful learning cultures are going to be the ones which enable an open education. Now, in the past, I'm sure lots of you are familiar with a lot of the common techniques of doing that. For example, it might be giving a particular budget to an individual for them to grow in the way that they might want. It could be signing on to something like Udemy, which does help people to develop beyond the role. But we've got to remember that learning is a 360-degree service. We are working with a national entertainment organization. And of course, their key focus is on delivering the job role. It's on skills and behavior for delivering the job role. But they do also support people with everything from, I don't know, grammar to time management to prioritization, which essentially provides them with a great employee value proposition. So let's just think about what some of the dangers might be. Oh, I need to reply to this comment here. So someone has written, interesting choice of graphic for an open education. So I hoped you enjoyed the irony of a book, an antiquated book for open education. So we've gone right back to the 1950s there. Okay, good. So potential...
That's called immediate feedback, Zac.
Well, I love it. I like that people picked up on it. Okay, good. So, do feel free to write in the chat. What might be the challenge if we don't teach beyond the job function, if we don't support people to grow in a 360-degree way? I hope it might be fairly obvious. I mean, one of the things which occurred to me, Mok, is that employees won't see the wider picture of a business, and therefore make connections across functions or in the marketplace and so on, and they'll be missing out on something, as will the business.
Yeah, and I think also if you're thinking about talent management in terms of people thinking about how they might progress their career in the organization, that cultural capital that you get by understanding what actually is in the wider context your organization sits within allows people then to spot opportunities and to show and showcase their strengths and their potential to move up in the organization. So I think certainly it supports the talent management strategy as well.
We've got one comment through here about retention. That's come up a couple of times already. But yes, I suppose if another company is offering development beyond the job, that might be attractive for them and difficult to retain people.
Yeah. And then, in terms of encouraging people as well. So, we've got some of our clients on this call who are really, really well known in terms of the investment they put in learning and development. It's a very attractive proposition for new hires as well. Particularly, when we're talking about organizations not having the income streams that they had previously and senior leaders having to cut budgets. An organization that's not only just investing in an individual for their job role, but in the wider context around, we'll give you opportunities to improve your grammar, to learn another language, whatever it might be. This particular example you talked about, the entertainment companies via their LMS, that's quite a compelling proposition for somebody. I can learn for the job and I can learn for my life as well.
Yeah. Perfect. Let's just move on to the areas I urge you to consider to focus. One is, how can we going forwards make learners feel like they're growing with the company and the company supporting that growth? How can we encourage our high performers to continue to be high performers? How can we build skills beyond just the function? What can you do in your organization to do that? And how can you ensure that our teams feel they're getting added value from the employer? All of those things are going to lead to better performance and increased retention. So do consider how you might be able to do that. The next trend, 4 of 5, is reward. We know that one of the most difficult things for any organization to get right is reward and also recognition. It's exactly the same in learning. We've tried for years to gamify different areas of learning with some success, I have to admit. But the way that social media networks and micro networks are springing up all over the place in the last 12 months is extraordinary. People now are used to and very comfortable with reward and recognition for input from things as simple as likes or comments or cheers or peer-to-peer recognition or builds on ideas. And if we can combine that with some of the other trends as well, like for example, led by tech with a digital platform, then we're streets ahead. But I need to point out that we need to think about something beyond what we might already be doing. So we have a learning management platform which does allow discourse between people around a particular lesson, but how can we ramp it up even more to bring it, so to make sure we can get upload of information as well as download of information so that people feel more engaged. So something to think about there. What do you feel might be, and do again, feel free to exercise those fingers. Let me just go back one here. What do you believe might be the challenge if we don't reward learning even more strongly than we have been in the past? What might be the challenge if we don't reward learning even more strongly than we have been in the past?
I mean, as we wait for a couple of comments to come in, you know, I think as learning practitioners, we're thinking more and more about the experience that we give people, experiential learning. And learning, I've certainly had it in the past where I've had, you know, when I was, God forbid, doing my CIPD, etc., I just had to get through this module, or I had to read that particular book, or I had to watch something online. It became a real chore. It became another task that I had to do. I didn't see it sometimes as a way of, you know, the organization investing in me or about my personal growth or where it might take me in life. It just became another thing I had to do in a very, very busy day, in a very busy role. And, you know, it didn't feel rewarding at times. It felt, as I said, like just more work that I had to do. And therefore, you know, would I have been in the position there where I might have, you know, looked for other expansive learning opportunities? Might I have sought out opportunities? Probably not. And I'll be really honest about that. If it becomes a chore and I'm not rewarded for it, I'm not recognized for it, and I can't see it as more than just a task to do, it's unlikely then I will take accountability for my learning, which we talked about being important earlier on. And actually then you as practitioners will struggle to create this culture or environment of learning that Zac was talking about.
We've had a comment here around losing the benefit of shared experiences. Absolutely true. Long gone, of course, are the days of just downstream learning where it's a particular curriculum given by the L&D or the HR team. Now there's much more, in fact, this leads on to the last trend. Now there's much more focus on community-based learning where people learn from each other.
And actually, you know, you talked about reverse mentoring. Certainly, you know, again, talking to some clients over the last week about their D, E, and I strategy. That one of the areas that one of our clients is exploring is around doing reverse mentoring for individuals, so they can share their experience, share their lived experiences, and create connections between leaders and distributed workforce across the organization who perhaps aren't necessarily represented as strongly as they might be. It's incredibly rewarding for that person to then actually enter into a learning contract with someone senior in the organization as well. So it isn't just about kind of the cheers and the likes, although they are lovely to receive. It's also about finding rewarding experiences where people are recognized, where people are profiled, and using it to address some of the challenges around D, E, and I.
We've got a comment around a feeling of not being acknowledged after giving feedback and suggestions on a way forwards. So they had to reinforce their point and asking for suggestions. Well, depends partly on how all the other trends go. So there's a number of different things which should come together. So for example, the right tech offering to enable reward and recognition peer-to-peer would be a good start. If you happen to have the foundation, the platform, which only allows one-way communication, then it's going to be very difficult to engender and promote any sort of peer-to-peer recognition. We do have a client on the call who actually is quite a long way ahead in terms of recognition. It's largely done face-to-face rather than using tech, but it's very, very powerful. So they encourage, as part of their company culture, a particular method to provide peer-to-peer recognition, which actually has helped to promote better customer service in the end.
You know, Julia, you raise an interesting point about all feedback, really, in terms of, you know, contracting, that as part of this learning experience, we will be open to feedback. So when you're putting together any sort of community and tech-based platforms, part of that will be a kind of almost terms of use, so that you'll be able to contract with people that part of this is about a willingness to give and receive feedback. And you've also highlighted a challenge that we've all experienced over email in the last couple of years, because you can't tell tone. You can't really understand the tone of what someone's saying in an email there. So all of those perhaps combined in terms of your feedback not being received as positively as it might have been. I'm sorry to hear that. But what should we focus on, Zac?
Well, we should definitely encourage interaction, of course, and that part of that is that contractual piece, setting expectations, and the contractual piece you mentioned just now, and really important to get peer-to-peer approval, not just, for example, trainer to learner approval, something which allows peer builds. So I put forward myself as a learner a great idea, and then Mok has something to build onto it to encourage growth that way, and something which fosters recognition of great learning or great ideas. I think is very, very powerful. The last trend is community learning, which I know some of you have been delving into already. But imagine this. Work is getting done, it's getting done effectively, it's getting done efficiently. And one of the reasons for that is that people are upskilled, and they continue to upskill because they want to. Employee survey NPS scores trend positively. The culture in the company goes from strength to strength because partly of the amazing community of learners created in the company, created by learning, by sharing experiences, by supporting each other through different learning challenges. And together they grow, they are motivated, and they want to deliver results. Seeing other people's best practice, other learners' best practice, networking with each other, breaking down silos in the organization, driving greater efficiency in communication, and of course, avoiding a feeling of isolation in a remote learning environment is going to have to be the way that we move forwards. And virtually all of the other trends that we've talked about feed into this one. Have the right platform, make it rewarding and engaging, and so on, feeds into this community learning piece. And again, it might be that some of you have started building that out, but how do we make it stronger through and post COVID? So do feel free to write into the chat with your fingers there what you believe to be the challenge if we don't encourage community learning.
You know, I think what's interesting is people start to put their comments in is, if we're building this community of learning, it is slightly changing the dynamics from, you know, the traditional trainer who is the expert and your delegates who are there having knowledge transferred to them. It's about actually entering into some sort of virtual circle and knowing I can provide stimulus as a trainer, I can provide a certain level of knowledge as a trainer. And then there's a responsibility on you and an expectation that you'll then comment, share, build upon it, and explore it deeper together. So the days of, you know, again, I'm sorry, Zac, the days of standing at the front of the room and saying, I'm an expert on leading in disrupted times, or I'm an expert on time management, are gone. Here are some principles. Here is some stimulus. I'm going to hand that over to you to help you, digest that in your own context and your own skill capability, and then encourage the community to build upon it and explore new opportunities around that.
Mok, one of the things which in our research, which led to this particular golden thread here, two words. One is curator and the other was enabler. So more and more we have to become curator of powerful content, which can be pushed downstream to encourage the community learning. The second part then is enabler. So we need to enable the community to learn from each other using some of the powerful curated content. And that's definitely going to be some of the key ways forwards.
And here around also around kind of, you know, if you're not creating this community of practice, you're reinforcing the feeling of isolation post-COVID that some people might be feeling. Absolutely. You know, if you're just on a one-way watching a video or being asked to just read an article, you might be feeling slightly isolated from the organization or from other individuals. Without building this community of interaction, this network, it can reinforce those feelings of isolations. Oh, we've got a nice comment from Paul here. Do you want to read it out, Zac?
Yeah, be the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Why don't we all take that as our mantra as we think about what we focus on going forward?
Let me just pull out one more before we move on, because I'm conscious of time. And that is, there's a danger that we might focus on the individual rather than on the collective, which might make it more difficult to keep people aligned, I guess, to actually achieve the strategy of the business. Okay, very good. So let's just think about what we need to focus on. I strongly recommend and encourage you to focus on how can you bring different functions, but also different levels together to learn from each other in a community. How can you encourage your learners to share their experiences? And that could be failures, celebrating failure as well as things which have been successful, so that we can support each other to turn things around. And also motivating each other by stories. Storytelling, as we know, is very powerful in helping people to change behavior. So how can we encourage that in a community way? And also, how can we get value in numbers of people learning together? How can we somehow make learning more powerful through getting distributed teams to work together on that? And also encouraging openness. Encouraging openness means that we're more likely to then trust each other and trust the company, which means that we'll get better retention, better productivity, and so on. Good. So let's just review very briefly those key trends. They were led by technology, quick and easy to digest, open education, rewarding effort, and community learning. You know, there's been something which has come up now recently in the Centre for Cities analysis, which shows that 1 in 6 UK workers have returned to the office, but worker footfall in cities is at 17% of pre-lockdown levels during the first 2 weeks of August, despite government advice giving firms the green light to get staff back into the workplace. And that report looked at 63 different cities across the UK. And it found that even footfall in London was down 13% of pre-lockdown levels. So you know, even though we still are distributed for the most part, we still are working in a different way. How can you focus on some or more of these trends in a different way to move forward? So I would strongly urge you to type into the chat, please. Tell us one thing you might do or might focus on to try to improve or increase an aspect of your learning based on these trends. So type into the chat one thing which has given you pause for thought, which you might change or consider changing in the next 18 months to drive these trends forwards. Whilst you're doing that, we've already got some coming through here, but whilst you're doing that, I shall talk you through our view, because we got the comment from Julia about, you know, what is our suggestion? Well, we weren't going to do this, but I want to just give you a sneak preview of what we're continually trying to do. So as an innovation consultancy, principally, one of our values is that we're better than before. So we are continually coming up with new ideas for different work streams, which might benefit people. And one we're looking at the moment and building is something called the honeycomb. And it's a way that we can bring our employees in the business together using these 5 trends. So what we're doing is we're building a community platform, a tech platform, something which is essentially a micro network where you can upload stuff, like stuff, and I can sit it on top of our learning management system so that our colleagues can just click on something and they can go through to a training, but they can also learn lots of other things from everyone else. We're bringing the community in our company together, rewarding effort through cheers and likes and comments, super quick bullet point things to digest. Our colleagues can do it on their smartphones, on their desktops, on their laptops, wherever they are. And so far, it's working out really well. So that's what we're doing to try, or part of what we're doing to try and address some of these trends. And it seems to be going really well. We've got some comments coming through here for what you might try and do. One is community learning. Very good. You know, I think community learning is one of the most powerful of the trends, but you do need some of the other trends underneath it to make it strong. Like, for example, the snapshots of the actual tech platform that we're using at the moment to try and drive community learning. Mok.
Yeah, so listen, if you want to find out more about what we've talked about today, you'll receive an email after today with a recording of this video. But also there's a lot more on our website, www.innovationbeehive.com. You can download white papers there. You can also look at YouTube, check out the Innovation Beehive page on YouTube to learn more about how you can, as a learning practitioner, really make your learning interventions sing and dance in this post-COVID-19 age. So I want to thank Zac for your research and your hard work putting this together. Some really fantastic nuggets and trends there for our learning colleagues online here. Thank you so much for your energy that you brought to it this morning. And I want to also thank you, our participants, for your engagement over chat, for joining us this morning. It was really great to see you online. If you want any more information, go and check out innovationbeehive.com or send an email to hello@innovationbeehive.com. Look out for our email, and hopefully we will see you on future webinars. Take care, be strong, and when it comes, have a great bank holiday weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.